Alrighty, it's Monday, week 4 of summer school. Today we're going to read chapter 8 of the Dactyl Hill Squad. Let's look at our schedule. So Monday, 7:27. Your warm-up is the Montgomery bus boycott. You've probably heard of that before. And then we're going to read chapter 8. You'll listen to me read it, and you'll complete the guided reading and the journal writing, and that's it for today. What was happening at the end of the last chapter? Do you guys remember? They were rushing along the Hudson River as fast as they could go to get to the orphan asylum, to get away from the mess that was down by the theater where the theater had burned. But the whole place is in a mess right now. So chapter 8 is called A Refuge in Ruins. Some vocabulary words are smoldering, which means burning slowly. Debris, which means scattered pieces of waste or remains. Tethering, which is attached or connected. And it's used in an interesting way, tethered. You could be physically attached or you could be mentally attached. Like you could be tethered to your home because you don't want to leave. Nobody's tying you up, but you have your love and your family are there, so you're tethered. Feral means wild and untamed, and ceratops is a short way of saying triceratops. Question 1 is what happened to the orphanage? Question 2 is finding the orphanage gone. Whoops, giveaway. Spoiler alert! Magdalene thinks she will go south, and what very upsetting thing do the children see at the lamppost? Why does Amaya go to the ruins of the orphanage? Go into the ruins of the orphanage, I mean. Why does Amaya say it's so important to get their records? And your journal questions, we're going to be looking at something called records. That's like the papers that prove who you are, like your birth certificate and your passport if you have one, driver's license when you get older, and any other things that are proof of your life, basically. What records about your life do you think are important? And if you could only rescue one thing from a fire, not a person, a thing, what would it be and why? Alrighty, sounds like an exciting chapter. Chapter 8 is on page 49. Turn to page 49, please. Chapter 8, A Refuge in Ruins. The smell of charred wood and smoke met them as they turned away from the river, and Magdalene's heart sank. She'd seen the dark plume rising into the sky as they'd gotten close. I think she saw that dark plume when they were down by the theater even. Had held out hope that it was some other building. Maybe. She guided the huge dinosaur up Fifth Avenue toward the still smoldering wreckage of the colored orphan asylum. Groups of revelers or rioters or whatever they were wandered in the opposite direction, looking for more trouble to get into. They seemed to be having a lovely time. Did no one care that someone's home was up in flames? No, Magdalene whispered as they entered the open area where the orphanage once stood. No! It came out as a scratchy yell. Behind her she heard the gasps and moans of her friends. Where were the rest of the orphans? Had they died? What have they done? Marietta screamed. One by one they slid off the bracky and stumbled forward through the debris-filled street. The orphanage was the last bit of twine tethering her to New York City. So that's tethering, not real twine, but a connection she has. And now it was gone. A tiny tear turned in Magdalene's heart, the only ray of light she could find in this terrible night. She would head south as soon as she could and find Montez. She would find Montez in New Orleans maybe, or wherever he was along the way, and stay by his side until he woke up. She'd learn to be a nurse if that's what it took to stay with him. The U.S. Army needed nurses, she was sure of it. Now all she needed to do was find some way to get down there and survive this night. So take a minute and write down those answers to the question. The orphan asylum was burned down, and Magdalene thinks, well, there's no reason to stay in New York anymore. I don't have reason to stay. I might as well go find my brother down south. I also wanted to remind you, we read this last Monday, and see if you can find evidence from this nonfiction piece of that really happening. It says in the summer of 1863, the New York experienced the draft riots. We read about that. White men were angry that they had to fight in a war to save black people when they didn't want to. Men were mad because the federal government's draft law, which forced them to join the army and fight in the Civil War, so they started rioting. On the morning of June 13, 1863, a mostly Irish mob took the streets and began burning buildings, smashing windows, and pulling up cobblestones on the streets. The mob proceeded through the streets to the asylum and broke into the building with pickaxes. They trashed and ransacked the building before setting it on fire. While the mob was focused on breaking into the building, the superintendent of the asylum, William E. Davis, and the head matron, Jane McClellan, quietly led 233 children out the back entrance. So the children were saved. That's good to know. So that really happened. Uh-oh, am I frozen? So, sorry. There we go. Okay, let's continue. No! Two-Step yelled, running ahead. Magdalise took off after him. Wait! That boy was always in a hurry to get to the worst possible situation, she thought. Then she stopped dead in her tracks. Two-Step had stopped too. They both stared at the dark shape dangling from a lamp post in front of them. Mr. Calloway. She knew him from his shoes. Those old Union Army boots he wore. Said his son had sent them from the front lines to make sure his old man had something sturdy on his feet. Magdalise could tell Mr. Calloway shined them every day. Even though they were beat up and had probably been discarded by some soldier, Mr. Calloway managed to keep them looking spiffy somehow. And now they were all that was left to be recognized of him. They hung him. A sorrow deeper than any Magdalise had ever felt before welled up inside her. She felt like the ocean was rising from her tummy, shoving its way through her chest, and trying to explode out of her face. How could they? Two-Step stammered. Mr. Calloway was... He shook his head. Magdalise understood. No words made any sense. Behind them, Cymbeline shrieked, and little Sabine burst into tears. Magdalise heard Amaya comfort her, and then say, Mapper, watch her. I'll be right back. Be right back, Magdalise thought. Where? And then Amaya strode past her, past Mr. Calloway, and directly into the smoldering ruins of the orphanage. So did you get that question about what did they find at the lamppost, Mr. Calloway hanging? So Magdalise is going into the orphanage. We don't know why. Sparkling, or what's left of the orphanage. Sparkling ash and black flames of debris spun through the air around Magdalise as she jumped over burnt logs and ducked through the half-collapsed entranceway after Amaya. Mr. Calloway's body still dangled in the front of her mind. She felt like someone had put the image on a hot iron and branded it across her forehead. She would never forget. But right now, she had to stay alive. That was the most important thing. Later she would mourn, let it all come flowing out, sob and sob and sob, but not yet. Otherwise. Something cracked above them. Amaya! Magdalise screamed as a flaming chunk of plaster plummeted from the rafters. Amaya looked up and leapt out of the way, landing with an impressive forward roll and springing back up. How did you? Magdalise stuttered. In all the years she'd known Amaya, she'd never seen her move like that. Amaya just smirked sourly and turned back to the hallway she'd been heading toward. Magdalise hurried after her. Amaya, where are you going? At least tell me. Let me help you? She finally caught up and fast walked alongside her through the dark corridor. The flames hadn't done nearly as much damage to the back half of the colored orphan asylum. The whole area was coated in black soot, and it looked like a pack of feral ceratopses had barged through, but at least the walls were still standing. Feral means wild. The files, Amaya said in a quiet voice clenched with rage. Our files. Amaya, we could all die like at any moment. Don't you get that? Even if we make it out of here alive, the mob that did this will come back and... Amaya stopped, turning her sad face to face Magdalise. Our stories are our lives, Mag. Even if they're incomplete and written by strangers, they're all we've got of who we are, where we came from. She turned and briskly walked around a corner. Magdalise followed, found Amaya standing before a shattered doorway. The records room. The orphans weren't even allowed near this place, as signs all around the hallway insisted in red, menacing letters. "You with me?" Amaya asked. Magdalise nodded once and then kicked away the battered remnants of the door. They strode in, side by side. They went to the records room. So let's think about that a little bit from in our worksheet here. She goes in to get the records of the orphans, everything that tells about how they got there and who dropped them off and when they were born, where they were born, everything, their whole life records. And why did she think that was so important? You can look back at page 52. It's all we've got of who we are and where we came from. And when you write in your journal today, put some thought into this. What records about your life are important? It doesn't have to be writing records too. Like for me, it's the photographs I have of my children when they were little. That's a record of their life. I would hate to lose those. And if you had to take something out of a fire, one thing, not a person, what would it be that you would really, really want to have? So yeah, records are important. They tell us about our lives. I am giving you a separate check mark for your journals, by the way. So you get a treat for doing the questions on the worksheet, but you also get a separate treat for doing the journals. So be showing me those journals questions as well. Alrighty? All right, see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.